Today, I thought we'd talk about a really important topic of building rapport with the athletes and people you work with. So let's get into it. G'day everyone, Coach Craig Rowe from the OzSwoosh YouTube channel and OzSwoosh Academy. And today I thought we'd look at a very important topic of building rapport with athletes and the people you work with. This has come out of a Reddit post that I read where there was a young coach who was trying to work out how they can better connect with the people they work with. And it's really important. I've spoken about this in previous episodes where I touched on the importance of understanding the people you work with so you can best motivate them. Because what we want to do is teach players, not just plays, and players are people. So to get to understand people, we have to build rapport and a better connection. Now, I would say in my experience over the years I've coached, I don't know how easy it is to actually build rapport. It can be quite hard because every person and individual is different. And some people look at different relationships between the coach and the player and the players themselves. So it's not an unusual question for a young coach to want to know how to create that connection. The reason it becomes hard is because a coach can often be seen as the head of a hierarchy and everyone else may well be underneath them. And while that isn't necessarily the case, it's how it's often perceived. And therefore, there can be a disconnect, much like in some work environments where there is a person at the top and a disconnect with those who work underneath. So I would like to think that the program that I develop doesn't take that approach. So I want to share with you some of the things I've learned over time to actually build rapport with the athletes that you work with. So let's look at number one. So the very first thing I would recommend that you do to start the process of building rapport with the athletes you work with is learn their names. As simple as that sounds, I've also said this in another episode, your name is one of the most valuable things that you possess. It is who you are, and you carry it throughout your life. So one of the things I've seen, which disappoints me from time to time, is when I first get to meet athletes, I often ask them who their coach is. And I'm dumbfounded sometimes to hear that they don't know the name of their own coach, their club coach. And that's a concern for me because then I question how much rapport is the individual coach building with the athletes and vice versa. So it's not uncommon at the grassroots level for kids not to necessarily know much about their coaches. So one of the very first things I do is whenever athletes come into our training, again, I repeated this in another episode, is I say hello to them and acknowledge their presence. I encourage them to shake hands with myself and other athletes, and we all say hello to each other. That's extremely important, and I want to make them feel welcome in the program. So the first step is just acknowledging that they've arrived. Even when I'm on court with other groups, I will say, "G'day," whatever the name of the athlete is, and acknowledge their presence. Later on, I will then interact with them and shake their hands. So that is one of the most important and simple tips you can do to start to build rapport with the athletes you work with. Use drills early in your trainings. So when you first get a team together, to build rapport by developing that concept around learning each other's names. So run drills that will teach athletes each other's names, where they're constantly calling each other's names. Good drills to do this are passing drills. We like to put a name on the pass, is what we say at OzSwoosh. So we like to use our names when calling for the ball and even at times passing the ball. So that is the easiest way to allow your athletes to also learn each other's names. It is the foundation on which all communication is then built. So names are the first thing that are important to building rapport with those that you work with. One of the things we like to do at OzSwoosh is also develop opportunities outside our training. Training is an environment where athletes come, they do their training, and they often leave straight out the door. And it doesn't provide much opportunity for us to get to know each other as people. So what OzSwoosh does is we actually create social events. So events that will take us outside the training environment and put us in an environment where we're just forced to talk to each other about things that aren't necessarily basketball related. Often we find that the things that join us and combine us, our interests, don't necessarily reflect who we are as people, meaning I love basketball, so naturally everyone at my academy is going to love basketball, otherwise they wouldn't be there. So that commonality might link us together, but to really find out who we are as people, we have to work out those things that don't combine us together. And that's how we get to know who people are. And how do we do that? Very simply, ask questions. So take time in your training when you have a moment to ask your athletes how their day's been, or how they're traveling, or how they're going, or what are they working on at home. Just 2 or 3 questions is enough each training session of each athlete when you acknowledge them in a moment. Even if they're standing on the sideline, just say, how are you going? It's enough to build a degree of rapport and demonstrate interest in the athletes that you actually work with. So that number 2 is actually using drills to learn each other's people's names, but also taking a moment while athletes are in those drills waiting their turn to actually just engage slightly and ask them questions that will build rapport. And social events are the thing that we develop outside our training. So we might do things like dinners, we may do trivia nights, we'll do activities around going to the beach and training, we'll do games at outdoor courts, we'll offer opportunities for scrimmages that are basketball related. It may be mountain walks, mountain climbing. So they're all things that work really well. One of the things we find too is to build rapport with families and the athletes we work with is we also like to have dinners and barbecues either at outdoor parks or at restaurants. There is an expense that obviously goes with that where people pay their own way. However, it does place them in a situation where we're sitting and we're talking and we get to interact on day-to-day topics, not just basketball. And we found that a really good way to build rapport. So there's some tips that might help you with the athletes you work with to build rapport and or the people you work with to build rapport. The other thing that we do here that is really good, particularly for teams that are club-based teams that want to get extra games, is we enter teams into tournaments. Now, the advantage for us of tournaments is that we often will go to a tournament that may be 2 or 3 days long. And in some instances, we actually stay overnight. Now, when we stay overnight, it means that we're often arranging and gathering together before games, during games, after games, and also at dinner. And we'll do events like bowling, or we'll go to a games room, like where there's fun computer games and things. Those are the sort of things that outside of our training that help build rapport with the athletes we actually work with. So tournaments are another good way to build rapport. Now, I want to offer you, as I always do, a bonus tip. And this one isn't so much about coach-athlete rapport. It's about athlete-athlete rapport. If you can encourage athletes to train in their own time together outside your training session, particularly ones who live in a similar area, that helps build rapport between your players. And that becomes really important on the court as well. What I've found with the most successful teams I've worked with over the years is the teams that have the best rapport and the best communication and the best good feeling about each other as individuals and as people tend to be the ones that perform best on court as well. I see a translation being between building rapport and what happens on the floor. So that is why building rapport can be so important. And lastly, one of the ways that I assess whether I have rapport with the athletes I work with is I literally add the question into a survey that I conduct at the end of each year. And what that survey does is it allows athletes to say what they feel is best about the program that we offer, and those things that need improvement. And one of the questions is actually, do you think that the coach takes an interest in you? And, do you feel that there is rapport? We use a different word. Like, do you think you have a good relationship with the coach? While I don't go looking for the friendship of every athlete that I work with, I will say that I do like to build rapport and try and have some relationship beyond the basketball court with all the athletes that I work with. And I think that that is one of the most important things of the game that we as coaches have to offer those that we work with, is that we are there not just for basketball, but we are there for them. And with that, that is another episode of the Coach Approach. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you do want to leave a comment, please take a moment to give us your thoughts around building rapport and the things that you do. Do you agree or disagree with anything I presented here? Do you want to add to it? Whatever you feel you want to add, please leave a comment in the comment section below. If you've got any questions, you can email us here at info@OzSwoosh.com. And We look forward to doing this all again next week. So hopefully you'll join us for another episode of the Coach Approach, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for checking out this episode of the Coach Approach. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please take time to leave a like, hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet subscribed, and also feel free to share your own experience in the comments below. We hope to see you again in the next one.